Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes, and welcome back to the YoVideogames podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Andrew.
And once again, thank you to all our generous patrons who kept us going for over 390 episodes.
Yeah, if you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week is Lucas C. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you, Lucas.
Side note about Patreon, we're about to do a bunch of side quest stuff, and I did a poll on the Patreon. So if you're a patron and you haven't voted in that poll, go get it done. It's the poll is basically, how do you want side quests delivered? Since we have a bunch of side quests to do you want them all in one big block, or do you want them in piecemeal so you can spread them out at different times? Right now, piecemeal's winning. So if you're like, hey, I want it to
spread
be,
them.
Our
patrons like to spread them.
Yeah, you like to draw it out. They like edging too. But as always, we have a sponsor to thank. Of course, we're talking about Manscaped, and my current favorite product by them is the Beard Hedger Pro. The product that we first got involved in was the lawnmower, and the Beard Hedger,
both excellent products,
both fantastic. But the Beard Hedger has something that the lawnmower doesn't have, and it's this little dial on the side that lets you adjust the guard by 0.5 millimeter by just rolling really quickly. You don't have to like pull things off, swap it out. It makes it super easy to get a clean, sexy mustache, which I did as a prank for the podcast.
Or work on that fade, because you just roll your thumb across it. I've used it. I have one. It's fantastic.
Makes it super easy to
best razor, face razor I've ever used. I mean, lawnmower is the best ball razor I've ever used, but granted, that one's the only ball razor I've ever used. So,
well, I've used several, and this is the only one I know of that I could take in the shower. It's pretty fucking slick. It's also smaller, so the Beard one's beefier. Like, look at this.
Yeah, Beard one is beefier, and it works way better than any other one I've had from anywhere else.
I would really love, my ego would love to say that I need the beefier one for my balls, but I need the maneuverability. Okay.
I mean, you must have some really, really unhealthily large size things if you needed some of the size of the Beard Hedger for your nutsack. But hey, whatever. Who am I to judge? Maybe you stuck your balls in a microwave and got them all irradiated.
Maybe you have a huge dick, but your balls are big too. So it just.
I've heard that excuse before.
If you're interested in checking out either of these products, please head over to manscaped.com. Use our code YoVG, all caps, for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. That's code YoVG, all caps, at manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping worldwide. Your balls will thank you. And your face balls, which is what everyone calls their chin. If you're not in America, that's what everyone in America calls it.
You got a good dimple or a good double chin,
I have a decent one. I have a little bit of a cleft chin. Not too much. I don't have the full, like, Kirk Douglas, but I got a little...
Oh, Kirk Douglas, man. That man...
Shit, man has a hero's chin.
Bro, you could dip chips and sour cream off his chin. His dimple, man.
But today we're talking about mega games. And you might be like, hey, what is a mega game? I've never heard this term. It's not new, but it's not exactly used all the time. Think of it like the blockbuster of games.
I mean, it's generally called the AAA experience or the quadruple A, as they were when they were advertising to hire people to make Perfect Dark reboot. Right. They were like, make the next quadruple A game.
A mega game is like usually it is a hyper specialized, like it is the end all be, like Cyberpunk was advertised like it was going to be a mega game,
right?
Like it was going to be like a genre defining game, and that's what a mega game is, right? It's like genre defining. In some ways, Last of Us 2 was like a mega game because it was
right, and thanks to Sony's really shitty use of a marker, we know how much Last of Us 2 cost. We know how much Horizon 2 cost. And they were both 200 million, like just over $200 million each. One was like 204 or something, 20 something, and then one was like 217. I think Last of Us 2 was like, that was like the total expenses of that, which to me was like insane, because I was like, I'm like, how the fuck did this cost so much? There is a part of me that feels like that seems like overspending, but they are both highly polished games. However you feel about them, one way or the other, they're both highly polished. They do look significantly better, just graphical polish, not just it's got really high poly count. Where I'm like, no, like everything is like on another level of graphical
Right.
sheen in those games. So I get that sense of it, but I'm like, really 200? Because like even other big project games don't really come to 200 million. And then there's the statement, the rumor. It's really a rumor. Let's call it that GTA 6 is going to cost $2 billion.
No fucking way.
Now, my immediate response was that's bullshit. But they're saying like this is the total cost because the game is there. It's a calculation based on the entire development of the whole game that started in 2014, has no release date, has no announcement, so it's going to be over 10 years that the entirety of Rockstar has been making it, and like that's including marketing, and they said that's including the 10-year plan of post-release development. So they're basically saying the whole spectrum of this thing, the 10 years to make it, the 10 years to support it, the 10 years of DLC and the marketing for all of that,
$100 million a year.
They're saying it's going to be $2 billion. Yes.
Yeah, I don't.
Which,
So
if it is, to me, that is okay. You way over fucking spent on this. Like, you need to rein your fucking shit in because that's like way too much money. And people have pointed out too that's like with GTA 6, you could stealth release the game tomorrow and it'll make back $2 billion in a week.
no, that's I do believe that. I mean, this is sort of like games. I don't know if game development was always like this or game publishing was always like this, but like Hollywood accounting has always been a thing in Hollywood where like, what's the famous one? Men in Black has never turned a profit. The original Men in Black.
Right.
The Dark Knight has never turned a profit. It's 60 million in the hole.
None
Still.
of the original Star Wars have. Return of the Jedi famously.
Right. It's just like which everyone knows is bullshit, but it's how they get out of paying royalties and several different types of taxes, and I don't know how much of that happens in game publishing or the game industry, but I suspect that is where you're getting these like inflated budgets.
Right. Well, and according to someone who used to work, remember LucasArts used to be a thing. Apparently, according to them, they're like LucasArts was a tax haven for Lucasfilm.
Originally, yeah. Then it became all the technology that was in there.
Yeah. So like originally it was a tax haven for them. So it's like they're using games to write off stuff. So
yeah, and it's easily believable that Sony Pictures did the same thing with Sony Games, where like they started hiding picture movie money into games, and then their game department took off, and yeah, they're probably still doing something similar. I don't know that for sure. That's all conjecture, right? It's just me saying
right,
that.
Yeah.
But I do sort of suspect that is happening now with a mega game. I guess GTA 6 would easily fall into the mega game category.
The megaest of mega games.
Right. But the thing that sparked this, you saw a tweet about Baldur's Gate 3, which is a fun game.
It went semi-viral because a ton of game developers chimed in on it positively, I might add.
Right, because the point is like it's the most medium warm, milquetoast, like gentle. Hey, just a reminder: don't expect every game to be a mini game or a mega game because that will ruin the games industry.
Right.
And like the weird pushback that this tweet got from people who clearly don't know fuck all about it. Like I don't want to call anything specifically out, but like one person was like, it's perplexing that you wouldn't want new benchmarks in gaming. And it's like, oh yeah, you read the tweet, but you didn't get anything out of it, huh?
Right. Like, where it's like you read the first line and then made a knee-jerk reaction and like, well, here's the thing. So this was the thread started by a developer not associated with Baldur's Gate 3. It's Xavier Nelson Jr., who he works for a studio, and this is a hell of a I've never heard of this game. Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator. Now that sounds like a fucking video game.
All right, it's on Steam for sure.
Space Warlord Organ Trading Simulator.
Okay.
And I guess they're making
very popular in Eastern Europe, I'm told.
And I guess they're making a Max Payne-like shooter called El Paso Elsewhere.
Okay.
Next, anyways, I'm gonna just what I think his write-up was great. And I guess I don't think it's will be that bad to just kind of read through this real quick here. Where he says, he wanted to gently, preemptively push back against players, taking the excitement and using it to apply criticism or raise standard RPGs going forward. You can separate a game from the process used to build. You can't separate a game from the process used to build it. So let's look at why Larian, the developer of Baldur's Gate 3, who is the Divinity people, Divinity 1 and 2. 1, dev cycle stretching back to 2017. 2 massive games and their definitive editions worth of tech and institutional knowledge to draw from. 3, super successful early access period lasting 3 years, providing crucial community feedback, bug hunting, and cash flow. Over 400 different developers and 7 different offices around the world, not including outsourcing partners, and of course, the giant massive IP backing of D&D. And that's just a small incomplete list. And his too long didn't read is Baldur's Gate 3 is one of the largest one of the largest attempted mega games built by a specialized group of people using mature tech specifically built to make this specific game, reinforced by invaluable mass player feedback and market validation ahead of its launch, and a consistent cash flow from early access. And it struck me as very true, where it's like, yeah, like they made Divinity 1 and 2, and I've played Divinity 2 for about 30 minutes. I was bored out of my fucking mind. But I could tell, like, this for people who are into this type of genre, this subgenre, called CRPGs. I'm not sure what the CRPG stands for. You think someone like me would know instantly what CRPG stands for?
Character role-playing game?
I guess character role-playing game. I guess that's what it must mean, because I'm like, I just called it a Western RPG or an isometric Western RPG. I mean, it was, it's Baldur's Gate. Like, anyways.
Yeah, it's a tabletop simulator is what it feels like.
Right.
I like it.
It's. I think for the people who are into that subgenre, this is the fucking shit, man. Like, this is the shit. Everyone, I've never heard a single bad thing about Divinity 1 or 2, especially 2. So they made Divinity. Oh my God, Divinity's great. Divinity 2. Divinity 2's even better. They're gonna make Baldur's Gate 3. Sounds like a fucking plan.
Yeah.
Like it was just like, it was specialized know-how. We make this specific type of game. We did it once, we did it successfully, we did it again successfully. We definitive edition to both of them. Now we're on doing Baldur's Gate 3, this big beloved. Like, Baldur's Gate is kind of like one of the biggest, most well-known, most beloved isometric character at role-playing games of all time.
Ever. Yeah.
All time. So yeah, of course you get these people who made basically, because the genre kind of drifted away because everyone went to like third person, first person, so on and so forth. Like Obsidian did a Kickstarter for like other games, to sort of bring the genre back. It had kind of like a small-ish indie revival, a Kickstarter revival, right? And then Divinity is like, okay, no, it's like we know there's still an audience for this game, and they make it, and they kill it, and they kill it again, and they and then they go and they're going to make Baldur's Gate 3 because they're the people to do it, and they have early access to fund them for at least 3 years.
Yeah, I bought it early access,
and you're getting feedback from players, constantly there, and the thing is when you have that, trust me, there's no QA team in the world that's as good as having millions of people just playing the game all like nonstop. Like, they will find bugs that you will miss, and that's fucking great, right? They even bumped up their release date, I think, by a month for Baldur's Gate 3 on PC or something, on one of the systems. I'm a little out of the loop on Baldur's Gate 3 in particular, but what I do know is that people fucking love Baldur's Gate.
Yeah.
3, and they love Divinity, and these are the people to do it. this is the team you want making this game. And what this guy, Xavier Nelson Jr. is saying is like, you cannot expect this to happen with every character RPG or Western RPG going forward, because this was a specialized group of people. It's like, and it's kind of like this weird thing. It's like, look, talent exists. So why, it reminds me of the story of Mass Effect Andromeda and other things where,
Raging disappointments.
no, the DICE, because DICE made Frostbite engine
Right.
for Battlefield. And then EA was like, now you put Frostbite on everything, on FIFA, and put it on Mass Effect.
Right.
And they're like, wait a minute.
Forcing it to do things it was never
they're like-
designed to do.
And they're like, wait, yeah, forcing it to do things. And then they're like, well, have people leave Battlefield to go work on Mass Effect and FIFA. And these people are like, we made first-person shooters. I have no fucking idea how to make a third-person Western RPG like Mass Effect or a
Right.
fucking soccer game. So you got, and what did end up happening? Mass Effect Andromeda was Mass Effect Andromeda, and Battlefield suffered because all their people were pulled in all these different directions to make their engine work on other things. And therein lies the issue there, is that there are people like the game. There's so many different genres and types of gaming out there now, and there are people who are just simply better at doing one thing over the other. There are people who are experts at 2D side-scrolling platformers. That motherfucker is not going to probably not going to be the guy you want making, an Unreal Tournament revival, or COD or whatever, right? Like,
right.
the guys, Tiberian, whatever the fuck, dickheads in Florida, who make Madden every year. Like, are you going to sit there and you expect those motherfuckers, or can they churn out a CRPG? No, they make Madden.
Yeah, and I think what this is like, I think the misread here is people read this and thought, oh, don't expect every game to get better. And it's like, that's not what he's saying.
Yeah,
He's not saying that you can't have a high standard for games. He's saying that a mega standard where you have a highly specialized group that made the biggest and best version of this very specific style of game because they were exactly the right people for it at exactly the right time with the exact right amount of money. You can't expect that. You can't expect them to turn around and say, make the next good Witcher. Right?
Yeah.
Like they now all of a sudden, oh, CD Projekt Red's going to make the next big tabletop simulated CRPG. Like, that's just not how it's going to work. People that push for that are going to do nothing but back the industry in a corner.
Yeah.
And disappoint you.
And he made such a great point too in both the responses and the original thread. Where he's like, trying to do the same thing in the same way without the same advantages could kill an entire group of studios.
Could kill Larian if the next one they want the exact same thing without those same successes, that same situation.
Yeah, like, let them make a bigger, more expensive version of the same game, but what if it, like, people are burnt out or whatever, and then it's like, oh well, that was a flop, you're fired, goodbye.
Yeah.
And whole groups, and that's another good point too, where it's like, I hate, and I said this before, and I hate the fact that, like, you can't make a mistake anymore in a game.
Oh yeah.
That's the problem, is like, okay, Larian Studios did Divinity 1, Divinity 2, Baldur's Gate 3, all successes, all beloved, critical commercial successes, right? They can't make one fucking mistake, though. Their next game has to be fucking amazing. Like, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's like, it's very fucking rare at this point in time.
The other thing is like, it's not even about making a mistake, right? It's not that their game has to be amazing. It has to sell extraordinarily well.
Yeah.
Like, critical success means almost nothing anymore if commercial success isn't like
commercial
on its
is
tail,
really
right?
yeah. So and like there's super giant games which apparently got real close to not happening because they did Bastion, Transistor, successful.
Yeah,
they did, I think it was called Pyre. No one fucking played it. And then they did Hades, and Hades was a huge fucking rebound for them. They were probably only even able to survive the failure of Pyre because of Bastion and Transistor, if I got the names right of their previous titles.
Bastion, yeah, I don't know about Transistor.
They were like, but those games kept them afloat pretty much just enough to get Hades into early access,
right?
And then get it into release, and then it blew up on the Switch. They also made a very risky but right call, which was like we only have time and people to make one console version besides Steam to put it on the Switch, and it was the greatest idea because it's a very portable, good centric game. Yeah, it's like 10-minute runs, perfect for a portable. So they made the really right call there, and then eventually got it on other systems and shit like that. And it was the same deal with like Vampire Survivors in a way, but like the problem here is just kind of like they're an indie dev who had success, and one failure from an indie dev who isn't a giant team, doesn't have a massive like marketing firm or whatever the fuck, right? Even that was almost enough to just put them under, was one fucking failure. If we go back even further, I don't know. I think they survived because they went hard into merchandising, but Behemoth, I don't know if they're still around. Because they did Alien Hominid, then they did Castle Crashers.
Castle Crashers,
and
yeah.
then they did Bit Block Theater. Nobody really liked Bit Block Theater, if that was the name of the puzzly game. I know they tried to promote the hell out of it at PAX a couple of years I was there, but like it never blew up, and never blew up the way Castle Crashers and Alien Hominid did.
Well, Castle Crashers became part of like the zeitgeist. Like everybody knew about Castle Crash. Like there were Castle Crashers T-shirts the people who never played a game ever were wearing and shit like that.
Yeah, and I know they kind of got really heavily into merchandising and stuff.
Oh
like,
yeah,
but I don't know if maybe Behemoth's still around, but it's like, when was the last time you heard about Behemoth making a game?
right.
Certainly not showing up at any of the Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft directs. So this is the thing, and that was even longer ago. I mean, I guess they're still around, but like, yeah, you look at their homepage and it's still, it's their Alien Hominid Invasion is on their wish list, and then there was a thing called Pit People.
Yeah, it's like Battle Block Theater is the last one.
Yeah, like they have not made a lot of games since Battle Block Theater came out, and did not really blow things up at all.
Oh, and so they had Pit People. They did. So Battle Block Theater was their last thing for a while, and then they did Castle Crashers Remastered in 2015. Pit People was in 2018, and now they have Alien Hominid Invasion. So they're returning to the well. It's a reimagination of Alien Hominid, which was a great game. So we'll see. It does seem like they're sort of locked in a weird cycle right now, but and they were huge. They were one of the biggest successes for any indie studio, right?
Yeah, early on. I mean, they came from fucking Newgrounds, man.
Right? Yeah. They I think they're still privately owned. I just looked at. Yeah, they're still privately owned too.
Good for them. I don't know if there's a ton of people. They probably, one thing they could probably be surviving on is the fact that they probably may not have they don't have a giant, massive workforce of people or whatever, right?
Well, they still do basically Flash games, right? And Flash games
take
way less people than
in a way. And then there's even and here's the other thing too. I don't want to like get too off track here, but like if say an indie developer is like super successful and they just kind of like, wow, I made millions of dollars off this thing, I'm done. Like the guy who created Terraria was like, I'd like to start working on a second game, but too much people keep putting money into Terraria and keep wanting updates to Terraria that he's just like, I can't even think about making the other game because right now I'm like, too many people are still buying and looking forward to updates in Terraria. And it's like, I mean, that's more like, okay, he's actually still working on the original game. So it's not like he just took his money and ran.
But also it's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have. And it's also kind of like, okay, I respect someone who's like, I made millions and millions of dollars off this small project that I did it all on my own, or I did it with like one or two other people. And we're just like, we're millionaires now. Bye. Like, like if the devs of Among Us, which was 5 people, and like the 5th person was like a PR person they hired, if the devs of Among Us just said at some point, we're not making another game, we don't even fucking care. Like this blew up, we became multi-millionaires. We're done. I'd be like, I respect that. Yeah. Whatever, dude. Fucking cares. Like,
move to Hawaii, surf every day. I don't know.
Move to Hawaii, surf every day, man. Like,
hang out with Sakaguchi.
Yeah. So I can respect that happening there too, but But yeah, I mean, ultimately, my point is just that game studios need to be able to survive a failure.
Right.
And there is one studio in particular that is surviving a recent failure. And the only reason it's surviving that recent failure is because of who owns them, and that's Redfall. I'm talking about Arcane Studios,
Right.
where Microsoft came out and said, we have no plans to shut down or do anything with Arcane, because Redfall, flopped. And good on them. I'm glad Phil or someone took that stance. I'm like, well, we had a highly respected previously successful studio. We shoehorned them into this fucking live service shit, and nobody liked it, and it was unpolished fucking mess. Like, pick them up, dust them off, figure out what went wrong. You know what went wrong. It was with your fucking project management. But don't shut them down. And so at least they're doing the right thing there. And this is why I'm actually kind of okay with some of these studio acquisitions. I know a lot of people, some people in particular kind of hate studio acquisitions. And I'm like, yeah, but if it's a studio that's basically just going to go fucking under and Microsoft just decides, hey, fuck it, we'll buy them. We'll keep them. Double Fine Productions. I cannot in my brain see any way that company survived independently without being bought by Microsoft. Like all of their quirky projects, none of them sold that well.
I go back and forth on it because part of me is like more studios means more competition. But the development studio is not really the competitor.
Yeah.
More publishers. If publishers are getting bought out, which, Activision's getting bought out as a publisher. And that I do agree is concerning from a consumer standpoint.
It would be if Activision did more than what they do now.
Right. All they make is COD. So now you have more hope of seeing some of their other stuff come out again.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the main reason I've been okay with, Activision getting bought.
If we want to really talk it, like that FTC court battle, what really drug some shit into the limelight, and we didn't even get to discover. We didn't even get to discover yet, which might be for a separate case. Here's the thing. People are like, oh, Microsoft is ruining the game. They're just buying everyone up. I'm like, but did you listen to the reason why they were doing that?
Yeah.
Because they had gotten wind that Sony was going to pay for exclusivity for everything. Not buy any studios, just pay for they literally said that Sony was going to buy for exclusivity rights to Starfield originally.
Mm-hmm.
They had already done it with Deathloop. They'd already done it with Tokyo Ghostwire, and they were going to do it with Starfield. And here's the thing, and the whole point of this was Microsoft was way behind, so Sony can go to them and say, we want to lock this in for an exclusivity deal. It's going to sell the best on our system anyways. We'll pay you the difference of what it would have sold on Xbox, which is significantly less than the reverse. Basically, what I'm saying is, okay, let's say they need to make up $15 million of lost sales, right? And it's just a number. Just forget don't focus on the number. Because okay, I'm Sony. I want exclusivity to this. Make this deal, make it exclusive to us, and we'll give you the $15 million you would have earned on Xbox, if you released it multi-platform, but just make it only for us. Xbox, if they try to make that same deal, they're like, oh, we make it exclusive to Xbox, and we'll pay you for the difference of the loss. The PlayStation sales were so far ahead that Microsoft would have to pay $45 million instead of $15 million that Sony would have to pay. So they were fucking screwed. They would every single game they would have to pay like 3 to 4 to 5 times as much money for exclusivity, and it's really fucking funny when I see clips of like Sony fanboys, content creators sitting there and literally going, Sony did this. Like they've basically come to the acceptance stage where it's like Sony went too hard too fast. They were going around throwing exclusivity because they were so fucking gung-ho about burying their competition so badly that they literally as they say, they fucked around and found out by going after every fucking third party they fucking could and lock every big game up exclusive to them. They basically made Microsoft go, well,
and we got to buy them. Yeah.
We got deep pockets. We'll just fucking buy the studio outright from you. And then they fucking threw a giant piss shit fit over them doing this, but they had no fucking argument, and that's where they fucked up.
Right.
Because they thought they could bribe their way out of the court systems for this, and they fucked around and they found out, because deep pockets also come with expensive lawyers.
Big dicks. They put Microsoft in a corner it had to fuck its way out of.
Yeah,
And it did.
and it did, because it's got a lot of money.
What is it? The dildo of consequences rarely arrives lubed.
Lubed.
Yeah. But one thing that I do think is sort of interesting about the mega game controversy is it's not really even a controversy. It's just we don't want every game to be a mega game, just the same way that we didn't want every movie to be a blockbuster, right? Right now, every movie that comes out has to be a behemoth, success to get its money back. There's no 5, 10, 15, $30 million movie anymore. It's all 100 million plus.
Right.
You don't want that to happen to games too.
I mean, it already kind of is.
It is sort of happening because of Sony. Sony wants every single one of its games to be a blockbuster and a hit. Nintendo went the opposite way. It has its blockbusters, but like Nintendo's blockbusters aren't. It's not the same idea, right? Like Breath of the Wild or not Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Isn't it's a AAA title, but it isn't like, again, for lack of a better comparison, Final Fantasy 16 in terms of like the polish and the audience it's going after.
Yeah.
There's a reason Final Fantasy 16 tries to be the Game of Thrones, of gaming, right? That's what they wanted, because they want that Game of Thrones money. They want that position. You don't want every fucking game to come out to be going after that position, to be going after the AAA or the mega game. It's a real mistake, because then you never get a Hades. You are really in a lot of ways.
You don't get a Vampire Survivors, a Hades.
Right. You don't get a Pokemon even. Like, yeah, Pokemon's a prestige title, but like it isn't necessary. It's not a mega game. You're like, if it
they're
came
certainly
down to,
they're not spending mega money on it.
No, and if it came down to it, like, I don't know that that's the franchise that they'd decide to do that. Nintendo has decided to go the opposite direction with their games, which is beautiful and wonderful and flies in the face of this worry. But Sony's not going to make any of those types of titles. They're on the path of making nothing but AAA titles.
And the thing is, it's not like Sony didn't try.
No, that's true.
They kind of tried, but they never knew how to market it. Like, it was like this whole the wide gulf between marketing, and I can tell you this from people's firsthand fucking experience. I can't go into like any details, but like there were smaller titles that Sony made, but had no idea how to promote them.
Mm-hmm.
This was especially true PS3, PS4 era. With some of them were successful, like Journey, even Flower to an extent. But there's a ton of games that, if I started listening, you would either go, "I've never heard of it," or "Oh yeah, that game."
Right.
And let's not forget that they shut down one of those studios that made Concrete Genie. Because who the fuck heard of Concrete Genie? Because they made Nintendo-like games, Tearaway, Concrete Genie, Gravity Rush, even to a small. That's a little bigger than India. That's like somewhere in between, right? But they're all fucking gone because Sony has no idea how to fucking market a Nintendo-style game.
Right, and they've spent so much money and time trying to get a totally different audience.
Yeah.
That audience almost entirely exists on Nintendo systems now. There's some on Steam. There's some PC audience for stuff like that. But like, it almost entirely exists for Switch users now. Which is sort of sad. Like, I what it is like, there's this, it's tech bros getting involved in every industry. Everybody wants that fucking we print money tech bullshit. Siloing. Have you ever heard the term siloing?
Maybe, but I did hear this argument recently about how, like, basically tech bros know nothing about actual game development. So there's all these like, like the metaverse in general and
Right.
shit like that. We're like, this is what happens when you get tech bros to try to design something that's entertainment. They're not entertainers.
So entertainment is what's called a prestige industry. Whether it's game or film or music, it's a prestige industry. Um, there's a certain magic to the industry, right? Where like you don't know necessarily at the end of the day what makes a really good game director. You know who they are. You know who the game directors you really love are, but there's a certain, you know, like magic to it. They could tell you exactly how they make games and you could follow each of their steps, but you won't necessarily get that, whatever it is, creatives.
Je ne sais
Je ne sais
quoi.
quoi, yeah. I don't know what.
Je ne je ne quoi.
But it is all creative work has that. Tech bros, the tech industry wants that prestige of a creative industry.
Yeah.
It's where you get how every tech company has a creative director. They have the creative guy. Steve Jobs considered himself a creative, not a tech guy. Like that was in his own words, he considered himself a creative guy who understood tech, not a tech guy who understood creative. And that's probably why Apple positions itself that way, right? They're the creative technology company. But there is there was so much VC money, venture capital money, free money, essentially going into the tech space that they wanted to put that somewhere else. So they went after tech people, the film industry, game industry, went after those tech guys. This is your AI, your NFTs, your all those ideas.
Which is funny because in a weird sort of
guys.
way, tech bros trying to be creative is basically like human AI.
Right. It's
biological AI. It's like trying to have an AI follow a preset path to make a video game, and what you get an AI looking thing.
Yeah, it's there's a strong argument for VC money ruining tech and for tech ruining entertainment. There is a pretty strong argument. But you have a prestige industry anyway. In tech, siloing became very, very popular for a little while. They go through this like every 5 years or so. There's some new popular idea. They bring in some new person from the outside, and that new person has their idea. Siloing is this idea of every single audience or in tech originally, it was a team, and your team has their guy at the top, and they're totally self-sufficient. And they're siloed off from other teams. There's no overlap. That way, this one siloed team can sort of do whatever they got to do. They can be nimble to get their stuff done, right? The idea for audiences, if you have a siloed audience, Nintendo is that they make the platforms. They make the platformers. And they have the platforming audience. So Nintendo can just make the wildest and the wackiest and specialized in platformers. And they know that their audience is the platformer audience. They love siloing audiences because it makes it very easy to market everything about your platform to that audience.
Right.
Everything about the Switch is, made to be for it. Now, granted, Nintendo did not do this. Nintendo doesn't silo. Nintendo makes whatever the fuck they want to make. And in a way, all of the Nintendo brand is siloed to Nintendogs, as it were. But that idea infected, I would say, all of entertainment in a way, where they don't want overlap. They don't want, they want the comic book guys go see comic book movies, and they don't want comic book guys that want to go see other films. They want comic book guys that only want to see comic book movies. They want to be very specific because then they know, oh, that audience, that guy, super easy to market to him. All we have to do is talk about the character from the comic book and make references to their favorite comic book, blah, 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 blah.
This is sort of like it's happening starting right now was San Diego Comic-Con, where they sort of discovered marketing wise how worthless Comic-Con was becoming. Where it's like they'd spend a lot of money to advertise a big premiere for a film there. The audience there was eating that shit up. They loved it. And then it hit the national and worldwide stage and meh.
Yeah.
just
well,
fizzled out completely. And it's like, well, what did that happen? Because you were preaching to the choir.
and the sort of siloing leads or gets mistaken for funneling. In marketing, you have this idea of the funnel, right? How to like narrow down to your most specific audience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they go down to that most specific audience and they try to build a silo of just that audience to make product just for that audience because they can print money. That's where that shit is coming from, basically. Because tech guys and marketing people who consider themselves also in the tech world, a lot of marketing got infected from the tech world.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of video people, they came from the tech world. It's why they can make, very specific engineered videos to sell your product type thing.
Yeah, well, this is also in a very, similar but not related in a way. This is a lot of what I read about. Even like 10 years ago, what happened to the anime industry? Why did the anime industry turn into what it is? And like, because it got funneled down to just the otakus. Everything got catered and pandered
Mhm.
to the otakuist of the otaku. Why? Because they were the ones who would buy shit day one. They would buy the limited editions,
Right.
buy specials. So everything just became about that. Anything that was sort of like overtly creative or different kind of got ignored. So that's why everything became either, either like perverted or shonen,
Right. But
like
it's why there's
hyper
character
focused on,
archetypes.
yeah,
Yeah.
hyper focused on those two things because those create the most die-hard fans. And when you go back to the 80s and you look at some of the wild shit they were doing back during that bubble economy before it burst, where they were just throwing fucking money at things, you had the most artsiest, weirdest shit.
Mhm.
Like there's like in a film called like I think it was called like Angel's Egg or something. Like it's basically like you were talking about films that like even your film school teacher would probably find too weird. Like David Lynch would be confused or
Right.
weirded out kind of thing. Like they were just doing whatever they could because they could just throw money at shit. Fuck it, creative explosion, creative like money's free flowing, boom, and then it bursts, and then it's like, oh shit, what do we do? Well, funnel everything down to the hardest of the hardcore.
Right.
You
Well,
know,
that's actually similarly the 60s and maybe even into the 70s, but the 60s, especially for film and indie film, that's where the new wave came from. Like
mm-hmm.
indies could do whatever the fuck they wanted because there was a lot of money flowing into indie film.
Mm.
Um, no, I mean the reason I brought up the siloing is that is what can happen if you go too far with this mega game idea, right? You
Yeah.
had a specific product with the perfect circumstances made for a very specific audience, and it's good. It really makes that audience happy, and so it's a success with that audience. You don't want to then go down the road where you make everything for that audience. That one game was a very good. Find the reasons it was successful. Oh, because they had strong monetary support to build the tools that they needed for a specific game for a specific audience. They were able to hyper focus, and they were the exact right guys to do it. So, what are the lessons you learn from that? Should you learn from that is if you have Dice, who makes an amazing first person shooter experience, you give them the money and the tools and the support to make the absolute best first person shooter experience that they can with all of their experience. The lesson is not everything should be first person shooters made
Or really, these lessons should not be like, well, take all their programmers, engineers
right.
off of the games they make, take them out of their own country even, so that their engine can work on all these other genres and games because we don't want to pay Epic any money.
Right. Yeah, no, it's the exact wrong approach from seeing what a mega game could do. Not every game needs to be a mega game, and the lessons you get from a mega game shouldn't be the lessons that they seem to be taking, that a lot of people seem to be taking. And this is something that I think, especially because we're podcasters, we're essentially fans with a megaphone. Um, you shouldn't listen to fans about specifics of game development. They don't know. We don't, right? We can't a developer shouldn't necessarily listen to my ideas of how game development should go, because I don't develop games.
I mean, I
It's
can sit there and say when a game takes X amount of years and it has all these stories, I might be like, there's got to be a better way to do this.
right, and you have a different background from me. You've got game journalism in your background. You did it professionally. That's different. But one thing that uh, there's very often your audience can tell when something is wrong, but they can't tell what is wrong. You should always listen to an audience about something being wrong, but you should almost never listen to them when they say what is wrong. You should figure out what is wrong with your experience and your tools, because very seldomly does an audience know exactly what's wrong.
Yeah.
Granted, my experience from film is like an audience can watches so much that they can tell when something is good or bad, or or they can tell when something is wrong. But because they don't know how to make the thing necessarily, they can't pinpoint what is wrong.
Yeah, it's like
they might think something's wrong.
Yeah, it's like eating pizza or some cooked food, and you're like, this is wrong, something's off. And it's like, well, I use the same ingredients, something's wrong, right? Like really knowing it. With the Baldur's Gate thing, I wanted to chime in because like again, other developers did talk about this, which was one of them was Rebecca Harwick. She works on Spellforce 3. She's like, I hope Baldur's Gate 3 is a generous once in a lifetime RPG, and I hope no one expects a 10, 20, 40 person team to make one. Which seems just fair. Insomniac Games design manager Ryan McCabe urged others not to use a singular game to set expectations for everyone developing RPGs, because it isn't useful and instead foolhardy.
Right.
Obsidian Entertainment, who probably have the closest relation to genre type to this, their design director Josh Sawyer noted that having the foundation set and the funding to build things on your own terms is invaluable. This is not about downplaying talented people working on Baldur's Gate 3, but about acknowledging this case is atypical for the game industry. So it's like, yeah, they're in it's like people just, I hope if anything with this podcast, if anything, we can kind of bring to light a certain things that's like people really don't know what goes in to game development here, where it's like, well, because a lot of people say like, well, why don't you make games like they're doing instead of trying to make all these free to play bullshit, blah blah blah. And it's like devs don't really get to determine
what they're making.
Right. They don't get to determine the price. They don't get to determine the price model. They don't even get to determine the genre sometimes, because like people were like throwing shade at like, Blizzard people and other that. Like, do you think people, working under Activision have full fucking control over what game they make and how they price it and how they release it and all that other stuff? Like
right.
They don't.
They
really fucking don't.
One of my favorite, I can't remember the name. There's this food critic that was really beloved. He was a guy in LA. He's a bigger guy. He died recently. Gold maybe is, but one of the things that he said as a food critic is like he cooks at home. He's like, but he was considered a tough but fair food critic. And he said this thing that gets applied to basically any pursuit where you're like a craftsman or you create or you're a developer or whatever. The more you do it yourself, the less harsh you want to be, or the less like outlandish you'll be with your statements.
Yeah.
Because the more you realize like what is and isn't in your control, and like basically you realize how hard it is to make something good. He was talking about food. He was like, and how special it is when you find something good, and how that special thing can't change how everything is done, because if it did, it would ruin all these other things that you love. And I think about that all the time, especially since we did the whole I beg you to enjoy things episode, where it's like, I think the thing that's made me softer on criticism, especially like, and maybe anybody feels this, maybe everybody feels this way, but like, when you're a teenager and you just like, it's really easy to have hard opinions.
Yeah.
This fucking sucks. Fuck that person, whatever. Like, it's really easy to have that black and white experience, probably because you haven't experienced enough things to have a nuanced view of that thing or that person or whatever. But as you get older and you do things, like for me, filmmaking, like I've been an indie filmmaker for since we started doing Assist Me 15 fucking years ago, of like where we're just like doing things. And the more that I've made, the gentler I have become in terms of like wanting to shit on something.
You make a number of film projects, no matter what kind of projects they are, small or big. You'll learn you'll never shit on Adam Sandler for casting his friends in
Right.
movies
It's
ever
like,
again. Like,
right.
people are like, fuck Adam Sandler. He always just him and his friends go. And I'm like, man, you ever try to fucking make a movie? You ever
Yeah.
try to fucking deal with all of that shit?
And
You'll
you got to
never.
spend 14 hours a day with these people every day for 100 days in some case. Fuck all that.
Tim Burton got that same shit. Yeah, Adam Sandler gets the same. I'm like, you will never fucking shit on them for that again if you ever try to make a number. Like, not even just one thing. Like, make a series, make like a mini series, make a bunch of. You do that, and you come back and you sit there and you bitch about, like someone. Oh, he keeps hiring people like his friends or people reliable. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, like there's certain things you never fucking take for granted.
So like one of the things about like indie filmmaking in particular, when we talk about making Assist Me, we talk about how much those cost, right? Some of the Assist Me's like Aliens or Predator cost like almost $5,000 or something like that, just in like raw costs, to like not even paying necessarily for people to come do the thing, but like raw costs. As an indie filmmaker, you have to make a $5, $25, and $100,000 film before you're an overnight success. I've made several things, but like I'm working on my first feature, really far in the future, but I'm working on it, and it's going to be like a 5 to 10 grand feature. And it's just like, the more I work on it, the more I'm like, man, all of my hard opinions of lower budget features are changing because of just like the raw challenges, especially being in LA. You can't make anything for cheap in LA. Like, everybody thinks you're going to be a millionaire tomorrow. So it's like, oh yeah, you want to use my location? Yep, it's just $5,000 a day. And you're like, oh, that's the whole budget. It's the whole budget for the movie. But with a mega game like this, people are probably getting pissy at Obsidian for basically trying to temper expectations,
Or
we're like, oh,
agreeing in this case with them.
yeah,
What people really just don't fucking get. Here's the thing that people, the real thing people are not fucking getting about this statement, and why all these devs are agreeing with it, is that they're not getting, is like, this is not something that most developers get to choose to do.
right. Everything that gets made is a miracle in some way.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at, is like every movie that comes out, yes, even though they're churning out blockbusters and like a lot of them may be underwhelming and stuff, it's still a miracle that it got made at all.
Well, the constant thing you hear is like, well, why don't you should do what they did. You should listen to your customers. You should do this. You chose to go this way. You chose to. Do you think the developers chose this? Do you think half the developers who have to make BR free-to-play games right now are doing that because they fucking love free-to-play?
Right, and they started 3 years ago.
Right? Like, no, like, developers do not choose to do most of the things that get put into these games. Developers do not choose to make microtransactions like this massive fucking part of the game economy. That is never almost any developer's choice, unless the developer is also the publisher. And then it's like, yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
But it's like, people don't get that. It's just kind of like every entitled, nasty, toxic shithead on the internet, developers should do this, they should do that. They would love to. They would love to, but they fucking can't because you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars now, and it's not the developer's money that's going into this. It's some other publisher or like, venture capitalist, if you will, or some other, some other person with money or a group of people, investing money into a product. And guess what? They get to say, they'll look at what's the market research say? What game made the most money last year? Oh, it was some fucking MOBA in Asia. Why don't you do what they did? Do the same gotcha mechanics. And we don't want to do the same mechanic. Our audience won't like it. I don't care. It made all this money somewhere else in the world. Do that.
Well, that's really the crux of the problem is they're looking at things that are doing well today, but the game's not going to be done for 3 years. So by the time the 3 years is done, is that game still a good idea?
Well, yeah, just more to the point, just though it's like,
yeah, developer doesn't get to choose that.
They don't get to choose these decisions most of the time.
On my final thought, I like to put out most of the dumb, like ridiculous opinions that you will see online. Try to remember they're between the ages of 13 and 20. A lot of them. Most users on the internet that go out of their way to say an opinion, and this is actually like a real stat, but I don't remember the actual numbers about it, but I read it. It made me laugh really hard. The most opinionated people on the internet are between the ages of 13 and 20 on average.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes when you're deep in an argument where you're like, can this person read? Can they not see that do they not understand the order of the words that I am typing out? The answer is no, they do not, because they aren't reading, because they're 15 and they don't care.
They have no real world experience in the industry or actually trying to actually cover.
They are deep in the throes of the storm of hormones, and they are just angry, and they don't care about whether or not you're saying something that's true. They care about winning the argument because, their hormones are just like screaming. I'm not saying that no teenagers ever had a good point. Plenty of teenagers have good points. And a very black and white worldview can be very, very good for, say, like moral judgments. Yeah. Teenagers tend to make very good moral judgments because there's not all that gray area to get in the way of saying the correct thing. Or, what is the correct thing? My point that I'm getting at is like many of these responses, some of them are dumb, fully cognitive adults, but a lot of them are fucking 15-year-olds on Twitter who are just like, yeah, why don't you just do what that studio did, you fucking idiot? And then they log off, they go and they, fucking go skating with their friends or whatever. They never think about it again.
They clearly didn't read the whole thing about like, let me tell you why this thing ended up this way. Why don't you do it this? Like, I literally just explained why it's unique. No, do what they did, but it's unique. It has to be under certain circumstances. Do what they did. Okay, you're literally asking
TLDR, man.
It's like, okay, let me explain to you why lightning struck this exact spot because of the weather and conditions that happened. Well, why doesn't other people make lightning strike that spot? Because the weather conditions. Well, make the like do what they did. I'm like, they can only do what they did because that storm only came around that one fucking time. And it's like, no, that's whining. That's excuses. That's laziness. I'm like, no, I can't literally fucking make the weather can do the same thing. I cannot make the same storm repeat itself. That's not how fucking weather works. Like, because that's literally what this is boiling down to is people are fucking like yelling at other devs or just yelling into the void about like, there was this perfect storm. Other developers need to strike during the perfect storm. Well, there's not a perfect storm to strike. I don't fucking care. You're lazy. Make a perfect.
Yeah, no, it is one of those things where it's like, in a lot of cases, the people that are asking for this don't know what they're actually asking for. If every game or if every RPG turned into this, you'd probably be miserable. Like, I'd be miserable, and I like the game.
You'd get bored because of too much, sameness, of course.
Right.
But like, it's also like, look, man, like I wish every fucking movie was as good as Castle in the Sky or all of Miyazaki's filmography, but it's not. But you know what is also awesome? That we get films like Spider-Verse that are nothing like a Miyazaki film, but are still fucking amazing.
Right. Yeah, and don't worry, you're going to get about 20 movies that are going to copy Spider-Verse.
And here's the thing, you'll never fucking get the perfect storm of Studio Ghibli again. You're never going to get a director in an animated film to literally just say, I made a whole new movie. I made a movie during the last 6 years, and there will be absolutely no trailers, no marketing, no stills, no plot synopsis. And I'm just going to release it in the theater and make my second highest opening of my career doing
I mean,
so.
the interview I read said that Miyazaki wasn't the one who came up with that idea.
And he wasn't. He wasn't.
He didn't like it. Was his producer who was like, we don't have to market it.
And he was like,
what?
He was like, well, I don't know if this was a good idea, but it's the second. It had the second highest opening, behind Spirited Away for him. But it's like, fuck, no one is going to get that luxury.
Imagine the trust you have to have.
You would have trouble getting the most well-known directors in the world to get away with that.
Oh yeah.
I don't think Spielberg could get away with that, or Scorsese, or anyone at this point. Like,
I do think it's interesting right now. I mean, the DGA can't, but something to leave off on the end of this episode. We are living in a time right now where, due to the strikes, SAG said that if you are a truly independent production, meaning that you raise the money yourself or you have foreign buyer, but like a studio is not involved, the AMPTP is not involved in your project in any way, shape, or form, any SAG union actor can work on it. And you have A-list actors and, you know, some B-list actors who are straight up like, fuck it, I'll do a truly indie film for day rate right now. And like part of it is like, this might be the only time in history where you're going to get like a truly independent film starring A-listers for jack shit money, where it's like, you know, it's not Brad Pitt collecting 3/4 of the budget for his fee. It's not Nicolas Cage getting paid the entire budget and then it's $100,000. But that means you might actually get like a Spielberg film where Spielberg goes out and he's like, I'm going to make a $1 million movie to see if I can still do it. And I'm going to raise the money myself and I'm going to own the movie myself. And then I'll try and sell it at, you know, film festivals. You might actually see something like that happen. I don't know necessarily that you will, but you might. And I mean, like, guys like Soderbergh are going and doing it right now. They're just saying, fuck it, let's go make something. Because right now, the studios can't give you money and interfere if you want to work once the strike's over. And so it means you have to be creative. And for a lot of those guys, it's the first time they haven't had somebody meddling in their ideas in a long time. So I think it's that could be really interesting. Off topic, but an interesting idea that like that could happen in games too sometime in the future, not even all that far off, especially with like, I think unionization is going to happen in development at some point. I don't think it's going to continue on like this forever. I think it has to.
At some point, there's going to be just too many people too burnt out, too stepped on. They're going to have to do it.
Yeah, it's going to be wild.
Because here's the thing, making games ain't easy.
Nope. And it's only getting harder.
And it's only getting harder, and talent's only going to become more and more valued.
Yeah, it's going to be sort of crazy. But any final thought on it, or I got patrons to thank?
Oh, well, my final thought is just kind of like, I agree wholeheartedly with the sentiment of that Baldur's Gate 3 does, in all appearances, just appears to be an anomaly. And you shouldn't expect this from every developer because it's completely out of developers' hands.
Right.
There are almost no independent, and I don't mean indie, but like, you know, independent game studios, you know, the way like Ninja Theory used to be, or Radical Entertainment, you know, people who would make games independently. You know, Gearbox was like a big one at one point, right? You don't have studios that can make, you know, AA, AAA games and not be owned by a massive publisher. That doesn't really fucking exist anymore. So when you're sitting there and say, how come every other developer can't do what this company did? And it's like, because there wasn't a perfect storm that this company had, and developers do not get to make those decisions because publishers are just PR people and they are chasing market trends.
And there was a
they will
short
force that upon the developer.
there was a short while there where Kickstarter almost meant that you could have more like this. But I think Kickstarter and crowdfunding sort of got infected with charlatans and killed itself. It's still there,
that
but
happened, and there was also sort of the fact that like games just take longer to make
too
than
long.
they think. They were giving way too optimistic of timelines, so people got too burnt out. Where it's like every Kickstarter I funded comes 2, 3, 4 years later, or if you're a Mighty Number 9 fan who was hoping to play it on the Vita, it never comes at all.
On that note, we've got patrons to thank. If you're interested in becoming a patron at any level, please check out patreon.com/YoVideogames podcast. Dude of the week was Lucas C. Thank you, Lucas. And our producers for this episode are Mutton Chops Johnson, the Pink Hammer, the Schmidt One, Screwnami, Kroy35, Hyper Viper 89, and Ziggy Z. Thank you, dudes, and we will catch you next time.
Later, dudes.